Materials. I would say that the mastery this artist has over these characteristics and incorporation into this style is what makes it so iconic. Illustrator, designer, and artist of so many characters such as NoriZC's, Saria, Ifrit, Silence, Magellan, Snowsand, and a few more from Arknights. I believe there's a lot to learn from NoriZC's art, so today I'm going to go over NoriZC's brilliant material rendering, use of repetitive patterns to establish cohesiveness in design, as well as the use of gray to bridge colors, and how I used all these observations in a NoriZC inspired painting. NoriZC uses lots of rendering of various materials like plastic, metal, and even cardboard to establish contrast. Contrast and thus interest is made between the shiny and matte, the bumpy and smooth, and opaque versus see-through. Rather than relying on colors for contrast, the use of various materials creates contrast. A reflective material is rendered with large gaps of value between where the light hits and the shadows, while matte materials have little changes in value. Of course, with bumpy materials with many little seams and shadows created by these bumps make a filled look in opposition to smooth textures. The use of certain materials in these designs inevitably creates these contrasts. Plastic fulfilling the shiny, sometimes see-through materials, while metal is reflective but never see-through and used sparingly. The use of different patterns to fill empty space is not only present in the in-game art, but also on NoriZC's Twitter, with the abundance of striped, zigzag, and repeating triangle patterns used with more simplified folds and details. And these repeating triangles are used everywhere in these folds. Speaking of folds, the use of weight and thickness of the materials impacts how they fold. Thick fabric is hard to fold, so the number of creases are decreased compared to something thin, like this white coat, with lots of little creases at the arm. The use of these sharp folds shows the 3D form very well with very clear creases. Let's finally look at the use of colors. If you start comparing the hues used in the lit parts versus the shadows, you can see how the colors are shifted to this blue-gray. But how come it doesn't look out of place when a warmer shade is used from the highlights? Aside from a saturated orange on the sharp transition between parts lit by the light and shadows, for more gradual transitions, a grayish blue is used. I believe it works because cool gray, without too much saturation, creates a nice middle zone between the warm and cool colors. And using it all over your painting, again, can unify the painting as a whole. And last but not least, the overall style. Fingers are boxy and straight lines are used everywhere with some small exceptions like smooth hair and water, contributing to a less realistic and more graphic look. So with these notes in mind, I created this NoriZC inspired painting. Let's skip to the parts that matter, mainly how to render the materials. First, rough sketch. Then line art. Then fill in the flat colors. My overall workflow was that after adding a small gradient in the direction of the light, I made these sharp triangles and lots of stripes for the folds. I did this using the lasso fill tool, simultaneously remembering to use gray as the transition. For this matte skirt, aside from this pocket giving me a lot of trouble when trying to define the folds, pleated skirts are pretty simple to draw. I started with the pleats from the bottom, then followed the lines up to meet the waist strap. Since the distance from the edge of the skirt to the waist was shorter on this side, it meant the length of the skirt should be bunched up with more folds. Noting the light source from above, I rendered the folds by adding lots of triangular shadows to give a sharp look. When the pleats were a bit lost in the shadow, I added a little highlight at the top to define them. But otherwise, I didn't add too many highlights to show the matte material. To emphasize the use of two materials on the shoes, I rendered them to look like they were made with two types of leather, shiny versus matte, by adding the bright highlights to only certain parts of the shoe. To make something look shiny, first use the soft brush with your highlight color, then the hard brush in the middle of the shine. I wanted a shiny looking needle, heart, and metal accessories, so I used this method for these parts too. And one of the last things I did was these clear sleeves to match the character design, with shiny highlights to show the reflectiveness of the plastic. I first made a layer with gray, then decreased the opacity so that you could see the arms and other objects behind them. To make the sleeves look 3D and shiny, I added highlights which matched the curves of the sleeves. Overall, you can see the use of patterns to fill empty space mostly on the winged cape, but also on the tendrils from the heart, bow, and needle. The triangles again were done by using the lasso fill tool, as it was the fastest and easiest way for me to draw sharp angles of the triangles. I filled the empty negative space around the character with some flowers, specifically bleeding heart flowers, because, well, the theme fits with the vampire character. But of course, it looked a little bit off, so last minute I changed them to the unbloomed version. I kind of feel sad because these flowers look really pretty in real life and I couldn't translate their prettiness in the painting, but they still look kinda nice. Here is the final piece, with the pros and cons I feel like I would change. I do think I managed to integrate what I learned from NoriZC into this without completely copying everything, which I think is the overall goal of doing these studies, experimenting to find what you like to paint, which I think is going along pretty well. A Star Shadow magic study is next, but feel free to share any artist you'd like to see. Thanks for watching. See ya!